single dad saved twin 6-year-old girls left by stepmom, unaware they become his everyday miracle. He thought he was just giving them a ride, but what they gave him healed something even he had forgotten was broken. The first time Caleb saw them, they were huddled beneath a flickering gas station sign on a fog-choked road just outside Ashridge. It was late October. Rain whispered across the windshield of his rusty pickup as he slowed to pump fuel, his body aching from a long day hauling broken pallets for half the money it was worth. And there they were, two small girls, sitting side by side on a torn duffel bag, their knees drawn to their chests, eyes wide and waiting for something that clearly wasn't coming. They didn't cry. That's what caught him first. He watched from the shadow of the pump canopy, hands trembling slightly as he screwed the gas cap back on. Most kids cry when they're left behind, but these two sat quietly, silent. Still, the older one, maybe by a minute, clutched a small plastic horse missing a leg. The other held a worn pink backpack in her lap. He tried to walk away. He didn't get far. Their eyes met his, not pleading, not desperate, just watching, like someone who'd stopped believing anyone would stop for them, but still noticed when someone did. He approached with caution, asked them where their mom was. They glanced at each other. Then the younger one whispered, "She drove away." That was it. 3 words. He took them home. Caleb Riley wasn't the type to invite trouble. A single father with too much debt and not enough hours in a day, he knew what it meant to scrape through life on the edge. His own daughter had died 4 years earlier, and the grief had hollowed him out so completely that most days he forgot how to be anything but functional. But there was something about the way the twins looked at him. Not like he was their savior, but like they were already planning how not to need him. That made him clear off the couch, heat up leftover soup, and find 2 blankets that didn't smell too much like paint thinner. They told him their names, Willow and Wren, 6 years old. Their stepmother had driven them 2 towns over, promised ice cream, and never came back. They didn't know their real mom. Their dad, Caleb didn't ask. He didn't need to. The next morning, he called child services, not because he wanted to send them away, but because he knew he couldn't keep them without doing it right. He gave his statement, told them how he found the girls, and expected them to be picked up within hours. But the hours turned into days. Paperwork, backlogs, a social worker who barely remembered their names. So they stayed. The girls slept in the tiny spare room that used to be his daughter's. The walls were still lilac. The old starlight projector still blinked softly on the ceiling when the lights went out. Caleb thought it might unsettle them, but Wren stared up at the stars like she'd been waiting for them. And Willow whispered stories about each one, making them up as she went, just loud enough for her sister to hear. They never asked why the room was already set up for little girls. They never asked if the faded name Sophie belonged to, stenciled above the door in soft cursive paint. Caleb didn't tell them. In time, things softened. The silence between them thinned into something gentler. Wren would pad into the kitchen in the morning and hand him his own coffee mug like it was her job. Willow began organizing his tools by size and color, saying she liked when things had somewhere to go. And Caleb? Caleb started remembering how to laugh. Not the sharp, performative chuckle he gave at the hardware store, but real, belly-warming laughter, the kind that snuck up on you when a 6-year-old told you your hair looked like old hay, but not the good kind. Neighbors began to notice. Mrs. Cleary across the road brought over muffins and asked politely why Caleb suddenly had 2 small shadows in mismatched pajamas. The postman slipped an extra Halloween flyer into the box for the girls. And the dog from next door, a shaggy mutt named Rex, started waiting by the fence each morning to be greeted by twin giggles and small hands through chain link. Still, the social worker didn't come. Caleb left voicemails, emails, letters. Each one answered with apologies and promises that never quite arrived. And with every passing day, the thought of losing the girls became a little more unbearable. Then one night, Willow had a nightmare. She screamed herself awake, tangled in sweat-soaked sheets. Caleb rushed in, expecting tears, but found her frozen, eyes wide, mouth open but silent. He scooped her up without a word, held her until her breathing slowed, her body relaxed, and her grip on his sleeve loosened just enough to say she trusted him. She looked up at him and whispered, "She left us because we were too much." He almost broke. He held her tighter. "You're just enough," he whispered back, more to himself than her. After that, Caleb stopped waiting for permission. He called in every favor he had left, drove to the county office himself, filled out foster paperwork with hands that hadn't held a pen since the day he signed his daughter's death certificate. It wasn't easy. It took weeks, home visits, interviews, a long, painful reopening of old wounds. But the girl stayed, and slowly the house changed. The spare room was repainted soft yellow. The name Sophie remained, not as a ghost but a guardian, painted now above the closet in a rainbow of the girl's choosing. Caleb bought a used swing set, fixed the kitchen sink, learned how to braid hair badly, and read bedtime stories without crying. One afternoon, he took them to the autumn fair. Wren rode the carousel 6 times in a row. Willow insisted on winning the stuffed raccoon with a crooked grin. They ate cotton candy, chased each other through corn mazes, and when the sun set, Caleb lifted both girls into bed at his pickup, wrapped them in blankets, and watched the fireworks from the tailgate. They fell asleep leaning against his shoulders, fingers sticky with sugar, cheeks flushed with joy. That night, he stood at the window long after they'd gone to bed. The house was quiet. The air was cool, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel like the silence was punishing him. It felt like peace. But peace, like most good things, never lasts long without being tested. The stepmother came back, not in person. A letter, typed, cold, demanding custody, claiming misunderstanding, filing motions with lawyers who hadn't met the girls but called Caleb's home temporary placement. Caleb nearly collapsed, but he didn't break. He hired a lawyer, barely could afford it, borrowed against every future he had left. He gathered character statements, photos, school records, testimonials, anything that would show the judge what he already knew. Those girls weren't just staying with him. They were home. The hearing came in December. Snow dusted the courthouse steps as Caleb held each girl's hand and walked inside, heart thudding like a war drum. He expected resistance, cold facts, legal procedures. What he didn't expect was Willow. When the judge asked her if she knew what was happening, she nodded solemnly and said, "We found our forever place." Wren added softly, "He's our miracle." The judge blinked. The court clerk stopped typing. And Caleb, a man who hadn't cried in a courtroom since he buried his child, wept openly. The custody was granted. Official, final, real. They walked out into the snow together. A man, 2 girls, and a future none of them had planned for, but all of them had needed. Back at home, they baked cookies until the oven smoked. Willow danced barefoot to Christmas music. Wren made hand-drawn adoption certificates with stickers and glitter and a smile that could light the moon. Caleb hung them on the fridge like diplomas. And that night, when the stars came out, they lay together under projector light, the same one Sophie once slept beneath. And the girls whispered their made-up constellations to each other until sleep pulled them under. Caleb stayed awake a little longer, watched them breathe, listened to the quiet hum of the heater, felt the warmth of a life he never thought he'd know again. In a world full of broken stories, some people are just meant to help write new ones. And sometimes miracles arrive not in flashes of light, but in small sneakers, plastic ponies, and 2 voices calling you Dad, like it's always been true. If this story moved you, we invite you to like, subscribe, and share true soul stories. Somewhere out there, someone needs a reason to believe again, and your share might be it. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.